Hi there, Giel here, and thanks for checking this new episode of Can You Feel It? Every week it's getting bigger and bigger. A lot of great reactions. A comment here on the YouTube channel from Raymond. He is giving great advice to put Human Resource Dominator on the list. Well, check this coming podcast and you will hear a great remix. And this is awesome. I got a direct message on Twitter, GIELS, from Peter. And he was giving me a shout out on Reddit. And on this platform, and thank you so much, Peter, for this great review, there was this question. And, well, I will ask you as a listener. Proto Hippie is asking, will he have any of the hardcore DJs on there? Yeah, well, that's a good thing. Of course, you got like Charlie Lanois, Mental Tio, but you've got DJ Promo, for example, a great pioneer in electronic music. So if you want those guys here in Can You Feel It as well, let me know. And now, the new guest. Oh man, DJ Chuckie, what a great guy. He's talking about his first electronic gear, how he was actually forced to produce. The success, of course, of I Am Miami Bitch. His favorite early 90s classics. Some great breakbeat tunes coming up. The real, and that's an exclusive story, the real story why his name is Chuckie. And his goal to make a drum and bass hit. And great stuff. Enjoy DJ Chuckie.
Can you feel it? Feel it? Can you feel it?
It's the music of millions of people all over the world. Electronic dance music. In Holland we call it house music. It was my history. It was my youth. These were my records. Who am I? I'm Giel Ballen, a Dutch radio DJ. And I want to share and explore my musical history with you, together with the biggest DJs. As you probably know, most of them come from Holland. Why is that? This little country in the west of Europe. And how did they all start? Can You Feel It? The story of a Dutch DJ from the bedroom to the festival.
Check this out.
This is going to be a dance trip down memory lane. Hi there, thanks for listening and welcome, DJ Chuckie. Clyde, our native language is Dutch, but for this podcast we'll speak English, or at least I'll try. But just for our Dutch listeners, wat zijn Nederlandse woorden die je toch graag gebruikt nog?
Nederlandse woorden die ik graag gebruik?
Praat je nog veel Nederlands?
Niet echt, nee.
Nee,
nee, alleen in Nederland. En als ik hier kom, dan moet ik weer wennen. Want sommige woorden heb je gewoon niet in het Nederlands. Dus ik maak me beter verstaanbaar in het Engels eigenlijk.
Ja? Oké.
Gek genoeg.
En is er nog een typisch Nederlands gerecht?
Wat is een typisch Nederlands gerecht?
Wat je lekker vindt, laat ik het zo zeggen.
Nou, weet je wat het is? Heel vaak in het buitenland, dan heb je zeg maar niet mijn favoriete Surinaamse eethuisjes.
Ah, okay.
En die heb je hier weer wel.
Ja,
dus
ja.
Daar zoek ik wel heel erg naar.
Maar jij hebt gewoon waar jij bent, overal hebben ze toch wel roti en zo, of niet?
Roti toevallig wel, omdat
Ja.
je overal Indiaas eten hebt. Maar echt een typische
sorry.
chow mein moxie mitti, dat vind je niet zomaar, nee.
Okay, so this was a bit Dutch, and
Sorry.
no, that it was okay. Let's start with the earliest dance memory. So DDM. Do you still remember the very first time you ever heard house music?
Well, the very first time I ever heard house music, it's kind of a tricky one, you know, because you have to think about where does it come from in the first place. If you talk about electronic music, of course, you know, I'm going to talk about Kraftwerk and I could go on forever. Early memories of electronic music like Shannon, Let the Music Play. But if we're talking about house music specifically, I would say end 80s, early 90s. And to be honest, I wasn't a big fan of house music in the first place.
Okay.
The 4 to the Floor didn't really catch my attention. Okay. It was because of, and I remember this very well, it's 1989, and you know, as a kid growing up in Amsterdam, we had so I had a little stereo in my room and I was able to listen to radio, and I discovered this pirate station. I think it was broadcasting from London or something, but I was able to hear it on the AM frequency, and they were playing nothing but breakbeats.
Okay.
So the early days of breakbeats,
before
they called it drum and bass.
Yeah.
And I remember I heard tracks from the Prodigy, the early tracks from the Prodigy.
Yeah.
This is why when you send me, it asked me to, deliver my top 5. I specifically chose music from that era, like around 91, 92.
Great.
I remember tracks like KLF, stuff like that. But once I started to go to the record stores, I discovered where all this breakbeat was coming from. So, I discovered all about suburban bass records, stuff like that. Night Force, and I believe those labels aren't even around anymore. The only label that's still around is Esttelle Recordings.
Yeah, Esttelle. Yeah.
So yeah, I discovered it through the radio, and after a while, eventually my brothers were buying music at the record stores, and most of the stuff was imported, obviously. So I got in touch with most of it was, I would say, Chicago house music.
Okay, that's more the club.
Yeah, because imagine that era, early 90s. So it was all about. There were some big tracks out, and they all came from Chicago, like the Mr. Fingers, Can You Feel It, Inner City, you name it. There was whole Frankie Knuckles, Ralphie Rosario, all came from that from Chicago. So that was kind of my first, encounter with electronic music.
And I don't know, what's your age? About 14, 15?
I was around 14, 15. Yeah.
So, did you go to parties or?
I was able to sneak in because I always had older friends. Able to sneak into some parties. And my dad lived in The Hague. And because of my friends in The Hague, I got in touch with guys like DJ Gizmo. And those were like, big time DJs, Dark Raver.
But you went to clubs like Exposure and...
yeah, exactly. Exposure, Groove Club you had back in the days. There were a bunch, but you also had Voltage in The Hague. And later you had Asta. But so through my friends from The Hague, I was able to go to Rotterdam and see like Dark Raver play.
Okay.
And I remember very well because they called him because he was playing at Parkzicht.
Yeah.
And they called him the Parkneger. And I was like, wow, that's heavy. But it's funny, So seeing that style of electronic music really changed my mind. The way the hardstyle DJs, the early hardstyle DJs, were dealing with energy, the way they would play records, and for me it kind of made more sense than just see a guy play a 8-minute record. It kind of made more sense, and also made me almost want to think different about, if I want to make electronic music, should I approach it different like these guys, but then again take it to the more regular tempo, let's say 125, 128. So that really, I'm happy that I was able to see those hardstyle DJs play. And that kind of made me think different about electronic music. And eventually, when I started producing electronic music, my approach was like that. Obviously,
and a bit of all those things, a bit of the hardcore,
the high frequency. So the one thing that really caught my attention was the high frequency level. So the moment there was like a, I was like, wow, and the whole crowd went crazy. So I'm like, hey, I gotta incorporate that into my music in some way, but it has to make sense for me, And that was really crazy because in Holland, we called it pancake house, and everybody kind of made it kind of funny, and it wasn't really a style, until, I must say, I think around 2001, there was this German techno record by this guy called Roman Flugel, track called Gehts nog. Yeah. And the way he dealt with the pitch bending, that changed the whole game for every single producer here in Holland.
Okay. Okay. We talk about this later because you're going really fast. But let's go back to the start of your youth house music.
Yeah.
When was the moment you began to produce tracks? How you got involved with electronic gear and?
So once I started DJing, the problem was I didn't have enough money to buy records. So I was forced to kind of borrow records from friends, and I always wanted to play different versions, right? So I had my Atari. So what I was doing, I would borrow records from friends, and I would sample the whole record.
Okay.
Just to reconstruct the record.
And then you made your own version.
Yeah, and I'm like, okay, but why should I reconstruct the record as it was while I could remix it on the spot, you know, so re-edit it.
Yeah.
So I started re-editing, and then obviously, you know, one thing leads to another.
Yeah.
You start making your own edits. Then you're gonna start adding drums. You know, obviously, you know, I got hold of the basics of 808s and stuff.
Yeah.
So I started to incorporate those, and that's how I kind of started. But I wasn't intentionally trying to make electronic music yet, as I'm also known from another scene, you know, from the more hip hop, urban,
Exactly.
even dancehall, the reggae scene,
Bubbling
bubbling
thing.
music,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
as we know it.
But okay, so you started as a DJ, and that's funny because a lot of guys I talked to, it was they started as a producer and they later became
Yeah.
like the DJ. But when was the moment you were in a club or somewhere you thought, hey, I want to be that guy who spins the records?
It was of my best friend. My best friend, he was a DJ, but I wasn't really interested. I liked how he was playing at his house, you know. And then one time he had to play at our school party, and he was setting up the equipment, or he was trying to set up the equipment, and then he also had to blind all the mirrors to make it look dark, you know. So he was doing that, and he's like, "Yo, can you please connect all the equipment for me?" So
Yeah.
I connected everything, and I remember I wanted to sound check for him, so I grabbed 2 records, and I remember exactly which records they were. It was Tough Crew, My Part of Town, and the other one was Chubb Rock, Treat 'Em Right. So I put both records on the turntables, and by accident, I had them synced.
Okay.
I'm like, whoa, what is this? And I'm like, yo,
Left, right,
are you
left,
hearing
right.
this?
Yeah,
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 left.
yeah.
I went left, right, left, right. And I was just baffled that whole day. I'm like, wow. So after the party, I ran home, went to the basement, trying to look for all the equipment to make it work somehow. And all I could find was like an old record player. I had a tape deck and a broken amplifier.
Oh my God.
But the broken amplifier is what kind of really did it for me, because it was so broken that you could switch on 2 sources at the same time, so you could hear
so
both
You
sources.
didn't need a mixer.
So that was my mixer, you know. So I was going back and forth. But that's how I kind of learned how to beat sync.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, that's how I learned how to beat
Okay.
sync.
And do you still remember your first gig when you first played?
Oh
some
yeah, of
music?
course I remember my first gig. You know, the first gig was like a birthday party for my friends at his house. His living room was this size, and he had like about 100 people in there, you
Yeah.
know. And
So
I was
like
in the
5
corner.
by 5,
Yeah,
maybe,
like
yeah.
squeezing, but
Yeah.
it's like that. And I remember because I brought my grocery car with all my records and
Oh,
equipment
right.
there. Yeah, it was crazy. But the first paid gig was actually a 1 year later or
Okay.
something. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And can you take us back to how the scene was like during that day? Because it wasn't that well organized as it is now.
Yeah, but you know what? It wasn't that organized, but still, for some reason, there was like some form of structure. You know, I
Okay.
mean, Identity was coming up, but
Yeah.
don't forget that those were the early days of It in Amsterdam.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
and
Big-
It already
big club.
had. It was an established brand, even
Yeah.
international. They had CDs out,
Yeah.
mixtapes out. I remember mixtapes by or mix CDs by DJ Sean.
Yeah.
100% ISIS,
Yeah,
you know. So there
Marcelo,
was,
yeah.
I remember that part, and I also remember at the same time there was like the hardstyle scene. You know, you had the Gizmos,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
the Dark Ravers, Paul Elstak, you name them all.
Yeah.
You had that, and obviously you had the hip hop scene and the
Yeah.
all
And
the.
you were a bit in all those worlds in worlds.
Yeah, I didn't really choose to be in all those worlds, but I high school I grew up with hip hop. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But I always had love for other genres of music.
Yeah.
And when I started buying records, obviously I was buying what I liked. But when I would DJ, I would play like hip hop because I don't want to be that goofy guy
Okay,
plays
okay,
an R&B record. Although I would have the records.
Yeah. But you
And I
didn't
would
play.
have like all the Chicago records and stuff like
Yeah,
that,
yeah, yeah.
obviously. But I didn't play them at the gigs.
No.
Thank God I really bought those records because those were like fundamental.
Yeah. And what kind of person was DJ Chuckie? It was always DJ Chuckie, or
Always DJ Chuckie, yeah.
Okay.
And the funny part is like, you know, there's 2 sides of the story. There's one romantic side of the story, where we're like, yeah, how did you get the name Chuckie? Yeah, we got the name Chuckie because You know, my friends call me Chuckie, and I used to be a rascal. That's the romantic version. And obviously, for your podcast, you get real story.
Okay,
you
then.
know, and the real story is real simple. Me and my brother, we would always go from Amsterdam to The Hague on the train. And my dad lived in The Hague, my mom in Amsterdam.
Yeah.
And on the train, we would always collect flyers before we got on the train. So obviously, we always got the flyers from ID&T.
Yeah.
You know, and they had all these events with Hellraiser, and we're like, me and him were like, yo, we need something. We need to do
Thunderdome,
something
maybe.
like
Yeah,
this,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Eventually. So we came up, and this was like pre-Dirty Dutch. So we're like, you know what? We have to figure it out how to make this work. So I'm like, you know what? Let's call the party Child's Play. And I still have the flyers. Let's call the party Child's Play, and then you're the DJ, and the DJ is obviously Chuckie. Like, we wanted to create that same marketing value as ID&T, you know, because we always looked up to ID&T.
Wow.
And that's, to be honest, the real story. It's not
the
so
whole
romantic.
Thunderdome thing. That
Really, yeah. And we were
wow.
like, you know, looking at these flyers, and all these flyers were so impressive because they had like 200-300 pre-sale locations, and it was impressive. Buses coming from all over the Netherlands.
Yeah.
And that kind of, you know, made us think like, okay, but how are we going to take this to our world? So we kind of
Wow.
made
I'm
it
glad
work.
you choose that name, because otherwise I was sitting here with DJ Freddy Krueger.
No, here's the funny part. You know, it was this close, or my name would be DJ 007.
Yeah, really?
Every time me and my brother like laughing about it, yeah.
That's great. And there's a story, I don't know if it's true, but I can imagine that, well, if you are talking about the whole sensation thing,
Yeah.
or ID&T thing, that at a certain part you were a visitor at Sensation.
Yes, I was a visitor at Sensation, the very first edition of Sensation, year 2000.
Yeah.
And I remember it because they didn't have a dress code yet. Right?
Oh, no. Okay.
And I went there, and I remember Sven Weet was playing,
Yeah.
Carl Cox was playing, and I was there as a visitor, and it was so impressive. You know, you walk in the arena, and they had like the big Buddha statue there. It was intense, and I'm like, you know what? Someday I'm gonna play here. And I had no right to say that because I was a hip hop DJ back then, you know. So it didn't make no sense for me saying that. So that was
And a few years later.
A few years later, let's say 8 years later, I made it happen. But it was more interesting because we always wanted to work with ID&T because we were looking up to them. So, you know, so crazy. In 2003, they approached us like, yo, because I was making noise in the urban scene. Like, yo, we're doing inner city, and we would love for you to host one room. And so that's what we did, and that's how the whole thing with ID&T kicked off. And after that, we started doing Dirty Dutch with them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, because I remember as a radio guy, and I think you had some tracks before. You had something like the Ballen or something.
Yeah, Ballen tot de Vallen. It was
Ballen
with
tot de Vallen.
THC.
Yeah,
Um,
a hip hop group from.
yeah, very controversial. Like, let's say the NWA of the Netherlands, you know?
That's
No,
that's true.
it's crazy because
true.
I remember the producer I was working with, QF. He also came from the north of Amsterdam, Amsterdam North, and he had like a house. And I invited RBDJan because the original track was with Def Rhymes, and they like, yo, what, Chuckie, you want to make a remix? I'm like, yeah, but if I want to make a remix, I want to go all out.
Yeah.
And I happened to have this demo from this guy called RBDJan, and QF gave it to me like a week before they asked me for the remix. And I'm in this car, and this track was just a 7-minute track of him freestyling, nothing but freestyling.
Okay.
No hooks, nothing, just him freestyling. And I was so amazed by his flow. I'm like, yo, I want to make this remix with him. So we went into the studio, and we started recording. We started at like 11 p.m. and the track was done at 8 a.m.
Wow.
But his first verse he recorded was supposed to be the hook. So the first verse he recorded was supposed to be the verse.
Yeah.
And then later I'm like, no, this is the hook. So we switched it into the hook and made the whole track.
Ben je in het dit vanavond? Doe gewoon alsof iemand dit vanavond. Dames blijven schudden, want die beat is verslavend. All out vanavond, lekker staat vanavond. We gaan ballen tot de vallen.
Yeah, that's the whole, or a part of the hip hop era.
Yeah.
How I started to make noise. So at the same time, you know, obviously all these big dance promoters, they were like, you know, we gotta make it work with you. We want to make it work. I'm like, yo, I'm the right guy because I happen to follow electronic music like forever. You know what I'm saying? So I kind of know how to make it work, I think. And we started digging and trying and figuring
combine
out
those
to
worlds,
combine those worlds because I was sure that I wasn't the only one that was a hip hop kid, but also interested in electronic music, you know. And the guy that made it okay for me was there were actually two guys. It was Armand van Helden and Kenny Dope, because those guys, they were making and hip hop and electronic music, and they were releasing it as music, you know. And I'm like, if they can do it, I can do it too. I'm okay with it, you know. I just needed a validation for it. So Armand van Helden, I saw him like 2 weeks ago, and I told him again the story. I'm like, yeah, because of you and Kenny Dope, that's why I was so comfortable with doing it.
But combining, but you made it. Of course, you did your own style, and it was much more electronic than those guys because they
So coming from, you know, making edits of songs and you know, trying to make it work for a dance floor, obviously, you know, when you add an extra kick drum to a track that already exists, obviously, you know, 9 out of 10 times you're going to choose for that 808, you know.
Exactly.
And so my music was very 808 driven, and when I started to make electronic music, I had to figure it out still, my style, you know, because I was making 8-minute tracks. Even the first version of Let the Bass Kick, my song that made me go international, is still a 7-minute track. You know what I'm saying?
The club version.
Yeah, like the club version, like, you know, 2-minute intro, 2-minute outro, you know it. So I still had to make it work. So I started experimenting and try to infuse the Dutch style, as I know, like the Dutch hip hop.
Yeah.
My Dutch hip hop was still up tempo, you know. I was trying to combine it with electronic music, was looking for sounds, and eventually I found something like that would work for me, because like I said earlier, that track from Roman Flugel, Gehts, that made, I think, every producer in Holland, it just changed their lives. And like, this is the way you got a pitch bend, and without being cheesy, you know. Obviously there were like a lot of cheesy records back then, but eventually we kind of figured it out, you know. So I had Let the Bass Kick, Sidney Samson made it work with Riverside, you know. Afrojack made it work for him, and I think Laidback Luke as well had a couple of big tracks, and that kind of started to become a style in the Netherlands, you know. But still, it was a local sound, and nobody would ever think that it could go international. But it's funny, we should have known that it would go international, because it was something that was unheard in the rest of the world. And as you know, if something is unheard in the rest of the world, then eventually it'll scratch the surface. And that's what happened with my track Let the Bass Kick in 2007. I made that track. In the first version, I signed to an Italian label. It came out on vinyl. There was little to no interest still, but you know, obviously he had a good A&R. And then Winter Music Conference happened, and before the Winter Music Conference happened, this guy from Chicago, he had like an edit with the LMFAO vocals on it, and he basically sent it to the whole industry. So I get to Miami, and literally every big DJ opens with that track. I'm in Miami, bitch. And I went to see all the shows because I was a big fan, you know. Going to a Winter Music Conference for the first time, I see.
Oh, it was your first time? Okay, great.
It was my first time. I see Swedish House Mafia opening up with a track. I see David Guetta opening up with a track. I'm like, what in the world is going on? So after that week, obviously my phone started ringing because all the labels were looking for that specific track. Signed it to CR2, and I think we went like gold in the UK with it. But that really did a lot for me. And then at the same time, obviously, David Guetta was working on an album. One Love was his album, and he was looking for a theme, like a sound for his album. So obviously, you know, we started working and on ideas, helped him back and forth. In the meantime, did 2 remixes for him. Back then, it was the Sexy Bitch with Akon. But I always want to be different, and I was trying to connect those worlds. So obviously, I invite Little John to the remix. Like, yo, I want you to jump on the remix like you Little John, like some Fat Man Scoop stuff, you know. jump on it, and it's a Chuckie and Lil Jon remix. So.
Bad bitch, freaky bitch, nasty bitch.
We did that remix, did one for him, did one for Guetta, another one with Fatman Scoop. It was for it was called One Love, and it was with Esttelle.
Oh yeah,
That track
yeah.
had Fatman Scoop on it.
Yeah.
Same style, screaming like crazy on
Yeah.
the record, but different.
Let's go.
Cause so you had the hip hop style, you had the Dutch bleeps on it. It was a total different energy,
And then the whole Dirty Dutch sound.
And all of a sudden
That was
they
the
labeled
name.
it Dirty
Yeah,
Dutch,
yeah, exactly.
which was my luck because Dirty Dutch is also my brand, so
Yeah.
it worked for me.
Yeah. So yeah, I was wondering what was first, but you first.
Yeah, because Dirty
yeah.
Dutch I started in 2003. The
Okay.
thing was, like I said earlier, I wanted to have my own platform because every time I would play for a promoter, they're like, "Yo, I want you to play this. I want you to play this." Very specific, and I'm like, "No, I want to play everything."
Yeah,
So I
exactly.
started Dirty Dutch, and so when Dirty Dutch was at its peak around 2008, 2009. At the same time, I went international. So I was doing locally. I was doing
For-
30,000 tickets,
Yeah.
and the sound went international.
Yeah.
Could have been better.
So even during, and that's for me, I heard your name with the other track, but for me, Slette houwe, I played it a lot at radio. During that time. But even then, your brand was already Dirty Dutch.
Yeah.
Oh right.
Yeah. And the thing was, it was hard, because I was still looking for a sound that would make sense locally, but would also appeal to the Dutch crowd and to the urban crowd, but also to the electronic music crowd. So I was kind of in a tough spot, you know. And I was just mad because it was hard for me to contain everything into one song, Obviously, I liked up-tempo music always because I did Party Crasher before, which was also up-tempo.
Yeah.
And then I remember, and this is also the podcast exclusive,
Okay,
the way Slette houwe happened is that back then you had a track from Erick Morillo with Audio Bullies.
Yeah.
It's gonna break down the doors.
It's gonna break down the doors.
And I'm like, that's so dope. But I want to make a track that has that same energy, but it should be Dutch. But when you hear it in the first place, you don't even hear it's Dutch. So I'm on the toilet, literally on the toilet. I'm like, kan niet van die Slette houwe, kan niet van die Slette houwe. I'm like, I get off the toilet. I'm like, Q. He was in the other room. I'm like, yo, turn on the music. Just give me a kick 128 BPM. He's like, for what? I'm like, I got this. So he started it.
Yeah.
So go boom, boom, boom. I recorded the hook, and he's like, yo, this shit is dope because all it has is a kick and just a few words, and that's it. And it's already had a certain energy.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yo, we need to write some stuff to this. And I had an upcoming show at the Heineken Music Hall, so he's like, okay, let's do this. So the whole verse, if you listen to the verse first, it was actually about Amsterdam and the whole thing. And that track, the original version, I remember it was just a raw demo, which eventually became the main thing.
Yeah.
And it had way more electronic music in it, It was way more infused with electro.
Absolute electro, really
Yeah,
electro.
like literally electro, like
Yeah,
that
yeah.
German stuff.
Yeah.
All the square sounds.
Love
And that was that track.
Kan niet van die Slette houwe. Kan niet van die Slette houwe. Kan niet van die Slette houwe.
Great. But if we go back to the start again, was there a moment you decided to become full-time DJ, or
Oh yeah.
just went that way, or?
No. I was very clear about it because I'll tell you, it's around 93, and I used to get monthly bus money, to buy my,
Yeah.
subscription to get on the bus every
Yeah.
day to go to school. It was 30 guilders. And I'm in the record store looking at this drum and bass selection of volume 2, I remember, looking at this record, and the record was $39.95. And I'm like, okay, you know what? If I buy this record with this bus money and I go home, I have to be serious about this stuff. And I took the money paid for the record, and I decided to walk to
That
school
was
every
the
single
moment.
day.
Okay.
Every single day. Because I think it was at Midtown Records. It was
Yeah.
in between, remember?
Yeah,
You had Rhythm Import,
Yeah.
you had Buddhism on the other side,
Yeah.
and in between the dark one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was in that record store, and I bought the record, and I was like, this is the moment I will be full-time DJ. I don't know how. Bought the record, I have to. I'll sacrifice, I'll go walk to school every single day.
Yeah.
We do it.
And what were your parents thinking and your friends?
I didn't tell my mom that I bought
Okay.
the record, obviously. I was walking to school without telling my mom. But eventually, when she saw I was serious, you know, she's like, okay, Clyde, what do you need? So I'm like, Mom, I really want to buy this mixer. And this mixer was about 125 guilders. And we didn't have the money. So my mom's like, yo, here's a down payment. Do a down payment and we try to pay it in installments. She gave me 25 guilders. I ran to the store, paid the first 25 guilders, and the rest of the mixer, the 100 guilders, I was able to pay in like 3-4 months. But after that, I had the mixer. So I had a mixer and I had 2 broken turntables, but I couldn't care less. I was able to mix, you know, and that was a very significant moment for me because, you know, obviously we didn't have a lot of money and my mom was serious. Like, yo, if you're serious about this stuff, then we'll make it happen.
So
We're
she
gonna try it."
encouraged it a lot.
Yeah, she encouraged it a lot. She was really instrumental to this whole thing. And obviously she saw I didn't care about school, but she said, eventually she told me, like, I've never seen you being so passionate about anything else. So she was cool with it.
And for you, was there a certain moment where you thought, hey, it worked, I made it, this is maybe even bigger than I even dreamt?
There were a lot of moments in my life where I kind of realized, like, hey, you know, I'm getting somewhere. You know, when people started to buy tickets and stuff.
Yeah.
You know, the first time we did, the first time I actually won an award, to be honest. And I have like many awards for being the best urban DJ or being the best club DJ, or however they called it. The first time I sold out the Heineken Music Hall. First time I sold out the Rye. First time I did Sensation. First time I did Tomorrowland. You name it, you know.
Course,
There's many memorable moments for me. But one of the most important ones, I must say, was when I did Heineken Music Hall 2005. And my brand and my vision, my platform, it worked, you know. People came for electronic music and for hip-hop. And everybody was cool with the fact that they knew, like, there's going to be all this music. It's going to get played tonight. And everybody was comfortable with it, you know. So I was so happy.
The whole package, the whole package,
Yeah. So
and
crazy.
it was new in Holland. It was during that time. It was news everywhere. Like, oh, there's this new thing,
and it wasn't even a new
No, it
sounder.
wasn't,
It was
no.
just a new combination, and it was you know, it was different. Yeah.
What was for you as a visitor, as somebody who loves music, and as a coming up DJ as well? What was so special in the early days?
What was so special in the early days about the nightlife, you mean?
For example, what can you still remember about early parties you went?
Well, yeah, you know what it is? I think it was more about the music than about the production, you know?
Okay.
Like I remember even let's say the mid 2000s, you know, I would go to parties like, for example, Sneakers or Rush at the Escape.
Yeah.
You know, going to all these house parties or Tay Down Song when I would go to Loveland.
Yeah.
And they were playing all this incredible music, and it wasn't about an amazing stage and stuff like that, you know what I'm saying?
Just the music.
Yeah. But obviously if you wanna appeal to the masses, you're gonna have to make it work. But still, so I kinda took that vibe, like, okay, we gotta keep it minimalistic on stage but still be impressive, you know. So we would do a big stage but still kind of keep it minimalistic. I was always trying to find that balance, but that really had my attention, that it was always about the music. Yeah.
Okay, well, let's talk about the music then. I ask you to make a top 5, and of course it's like a random list, and maybe if I record this tomorrow, you will mention 5 others.
No,
Okay.
that's the whole point, you know. I mean, if you ask me like my absolute top 5, I mean, top 5 wouldn't do no justice.
No.
You know, I could make like a,
Yeah.
but if I have to make a top 5 about a specific era,
Yeah.
I would definitely choose, like, say, the early 90s, because that really
Yeah.
defined me and my whole idea about electronic music and made me fall in love with electronic music. So that track list won't
No,
really change.
okay.
No.
Okay, well, let's start.
So hold on, I have it here. So
I'm looking forward to this because I think I'm really I love breakbeats and things like that. So
oh, listen, most of my records here, I think it's on the
well-
bottom shelf, are like breakbeats and drum and bass, like
Yeah?
early stuff.
Great.
No, but if I look at my top 5, I have here. So let's say Human Resource Dominator,
Yeah.
obviously, you
Yeah.
know, the Beltram remix.
Oh, the
specific-
Beltram
The
remix.
Beltram
Yeah,
remix
yeah, yeah.
specifically.
I'm the one and only dominator.
And you played that during that time as DJ as well, or were you more like the visitor who?
So I was using those tools.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because the Beltram remix had a tool on the other side. It would go like for like a minute straight. and it's
Oh,
intro.
yeah. Okay.
But the funny part is, in the urban scene back then, breakbeats were a thing.
Yeah.
Because people were always in love with the funky drummer and stuff like that,
It's
right?
great that you mentioned that track because, of course, it's like one of the first tracks, house tracks with a bigger bone or rubber cover.
Exactly.
With rap in it.
Yeah, and the funny part is that record also appealed to the hardstyle community.
Yeah.
Or the harder styles,
Yeah.
and you put it like this. Basically, the whole top 5 I have here would appeal to them. So I have the Prodigy, the Charly, obviously,
yeah.
but then the Alley Cat remix.
Yeah.
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 Awesome 3, Don't Go, Kicks Like a Mule mix.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Wow.
that track is timeless.
I cannot bear to see you leave me. I'm begging you don't go.
Like
Do you still sometimes play this in your set, or is
I would
it?
make like an edit.
Oh,
Yeah.
of course. Yeah.
And Kicks Like a Mule, the bouncer, the house quick edit.
Oh,
Your name's not down, you're not coming in.
Oh yeah. Oh, it's great that I now know the title because that's one of those tracks I heard.
Yeah,
at
it's
parties and
it's the Housequake remix.
okay.
Not Housequake as in Rogue and Eric,
No,
but
no.
Housequake back then.
Yeah.
And Public Energy 303 was actually one of the first records. I was like, what is this sound? You know, acid.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, what is this 303? So eventually I discovered what the name was, why they called it 303, you know.
Yeah.
It was because of the Roland, but it was one of those tracks that I was like, it's so hypnotizing, you know. And it was also one of the first house tracks that made me enjoy the full 6 minutes or 7 minutes. But this top 5 very specific is because I would say it would appeal to hardstyle people, or the hardstyle community. In house music, it was very known. But also in the urban scene, like there would be 30 minutes of a whole night, they would play like breakbeats.
Yeah.
And this would be the kind of music we would play. So I still have all the 12 inches and stuff.
Great list. Of course, you can check this in the link, and I will make a playlist with all the classics of all you founding fathers. Do you feel like a founding father? Maybe it's but because that's what you are.
To be honest, I don't feel like a founding father, but I can't deny it, you know.
Yeah, okay.
And it's crazy because I didn't choose for it or anything, you know. But I happened to be there in that specific era, where all this great development was in music, whether it was electronic music or even urban music or Dutch urban music.
Yeah, but you were one of the first guys who actually built a bridge between several styles.
Yeah, because I was uncomfortable with the fact that you couldn't play both styles in one night. Like, what kind of bullshit is that?
Yeah.
Who said it's impossible? You know,
Yeah.
How come I'm an individual and I like both styles, and I cannot hear both styles in one party? Why should I go to a festival with different stages?
No, it was
and
during
hear
the
it?
beginning. It was like you had to choose
Yeah.
Or you're like gabber or mellow, and I was like
Gabber or mellow, yeah.
I don't know. I like music.
Exactly, and it was even more extreme for me because I also like rock music, for example, you know, and I also like disco music, for example.
Yeah.
I grew up with 60s, but I enjoyed classical music, and it was so hard to find that combination, and I couldn't accept the fact that you could not play it in one party, you know. So I made it work for myself, and I was convinced that there were more people listening to different styles of music, because back then they just introduced the iPod,
Yeah.
and I couldn't imagine that you had one iPod with only one style
One
of music.
style, no, exactly.
Impossible. So I said, okay, I'm gonna try to appeal to the iPod generation, and such as myself, listening to different styles of music. So I was trying to make different worlds combined, and eventually I was trying to put it in music.
Yeah.
Try to translate everything, you know. So this is why I had the most, like, the weirdest records I would put out, just because, like Slette, for example. You know, it was what I was living at that very moment. I'm a hip hop kid, but so in love with electronic music. You know, being one of the bigger DJs in the Netherlands. So how are you gonna translate all that stuff into
But was
one
it
track?
always well understood? Because I can imagine some of the hip hop guys, or maybe some of the they thought, hey, what are you doing?
Funny enough that my friends in the beginning, I remember trying to play more electronic music in my sets. My hip hop friends would say, "You're not gonna make it in electronic music. What are you thinking?" And the electronic music guys were looking at me like, "What are you trying to do? You trying to create your own style?" You know? I'm like, "Yeah, that's exactly what I'm trying to do. How did you know?" And I had a vision, you know. And I think I had a vision, and I had it in my head so clear. It was just a matter of time of me translating it into physical music.
Okay.
And eventually they were like, okay, I see where you're coming from now. Like, okay, that makes sense. Because it worked for me, you know? And for me, the most important thing was, because I was struggling with myself, it had to work for me first. And once I was able to translate it, then, you know, if the rest of the world
That's a
would pick
good
up
thing,
to
because you really made it because you wanted it yourself, and you thought, well,
because I always was trying to make music for my sets in the first place. This is why I'm not really a big radio music, radio star.
No.
Because I always trying to make something that
Club,
works for my sets.
underground,
So even with these electronic tracks I was making were purely for my sets, actually.
You mentioned some of the gigs, but if you have to choose one of your most memorable gigs.
2008 Sensation.
Okay.
I must say, because a lot of things happened. First of all, 2008, and people, you can ask anybody in the Netherlands, 2008, name the top 3 biggest DJs in the Netherlands, you know.
Chester Armin.
You know, and no, they were like international, but I was like, I want to say a local hero, but not even in electronic music, just in general, you know. So it was a matter of time for me that I had to play at Sensation. And when Sensation happened, before the party, they asked me to make a track for the Sensation compilation. And I knew Sensation compilation was going global, you know. So I'm like, hey, what am I gonna make? So I finally took that opportunity to make a track that was so locally, like, the sound would be so local that people would be like, okay, this is typical Dutch. But it was my only exit to the rest of the world, to let people hear what we were doing in Holland. And that's when Let the Bass Kick happened.
Was Let the Bass Kick.
And funny enough, for Sensation, I also made another track called Moomba.
Oh yeah.
And that track I made specifically for my set. But people saw that as, oh, that's dirty Dutch, you know. Let the Bass Kick came out. Moomba came out. All these Chuckie remixes came out with all these high-pitched energy sounds. And so I didn't know that it was like one force of energy I pushed into the world. I didn't realize that. I was just doing my thing, you know. Like, even if I take the CD of Moomba, if you look at the remixers, I literally had the biggest DJs of the world remixers remix it. And back then they were not the biggest DJs, but I literally had a Hardwell and a Rehab remix. I had a Afrojack remix. I had a Sidney Samson remix on it. And
that were like friends. Who
yeah,
were
you know, and
beginning
I'm
as
like,
well.
looking at it now, I'm like, try to make such a remix package now is impossible, you know. So that's why I'm like, I didn't realize that I am one of the foundation.
Yeah.
Nah.
Yeah.
Eventually, yes.
You had a
but
big
I didn't
role,
realize
and
it.
you still have a big role. But you had a really big role in the house scene, in the house music,
Yeah.
in the evolution of.
But also,
Definitely.
I feel that, you know, in electronic music in the Netherlands, like for house music, obviously you had the guys that were doing the techno and stuff. You know, like one of my bigger heroes is still Speedy J. You know?
Jochem
You know,
Paap,
Steve
yeah.
Rahmat, those guys, you know.
Yeah.
But they were in their own lane.
Yeah.
And then you had the more accessible club music stuff. Let's say the Rogue, the Eric E,
Yeah.
all that style. But I even felt that needed a bigger platform, you know. And I had the same thing with hip hop. So I'm like, okay, grab it all and just put it on one big stage. And it was very important for me because otherwise we could not grow.
No.
Yeah.
And how because it went really fast after this whole Let the Bass Kick thing in Miami, the mashup.
Yeah.
So can you take us back to the moment how you felt and because that could be a time that as we say in Dutch, your feet on the floor. It's hard not to. Not to fly away and to.
You like you want to stay grounded, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's the whole thing. 2008, and before you know it, it's 2012. 4 years later, thousands and thousands of gigs further, and you're looking back at it, and you're like, whoa, did we all just walk through that door? I'm not talking about just me, you know. All the guys went through that door, and all at the same time. So obviously there was like this Dutch influence, because Tiesto was already big, but Armin was already big, but they never saw those guys as, you know, this is Dutch music, you know.
No.
It was always like laid back Luke, me, Nick, Sydney.
That was the Dutch.
That's what they saw as the Dutch force. Let me put it like this, you know. So it was crazy, and looking back at it, I'm like, okay, so how did that exactly happen? You know, and people kind of know the history, like international, worldwide, didn't kind of know the history until 2008. But what happened before that, they literally have no clue.
No.
Like, there's times where there was like an identity crisis in the Netherlands within the house DJs. Like that whole world, like Hardwell was looking for a sound. Everybody was trying to make credible tech house loops and stuff like that. This is why me and Hardwell made a record called Move It to the Drums. But it was literally still me trying to force my hip-hop sound in it. So I had Ambush on the vocals, and I still had like a pounding Dutch loop in it. But we were literally fighting local. There was like a lot of credible stuff going on. You know what I'm saying? And everybody was trying to fit in. And I was kind of the misfit that was trying to put everything together.
Okay, talking about this whole Dutch thing, and I don't know if there's going to be an answer, but it's a small country.
Yeah.
And why are our music and our DJs so successful all over the world, you think?
If you're talking about DJing in general, it's a different story than producing in general.
Okay.
I think in the Netherlands, we always had a good bird's eye view on what's going on in the rest of the world as far as music.
Yeah.
We always try to categorize things, you know. So we always had a good bird's eye view on things. And like, okay, how do we approach this sound? How do we approach this sound? Because even if I take you further back to the, let's say, to the Chicago days, you know, we still had that bird's eye view, like, oh, these guys making so and so records, and the Dutch producers and artists always had like an answer to it, you know. We would take that sound and then enhance it, made our own version, make it more European. So, you know, we had that good bird's eye view and always some form, I don't want to say some form of common sense, but, you know, we always wanted to make it logic in our head, like, okay, it has to make sense. So we would always approach it different with our own twist, but still look at what happened, you know. this is the same way we approached all other genres of music, but obviously we're not that good in making hip hop as you know the rest of the, or let's say America, but we definitely were good at making electronic music. So we evolved ourselves and eventually made our own sound, and obviously it helped that our neighbors are Germans, you know, who are even probably crazier when it comes down to, you know, the technical side of things. That helped a lot.
Yeah, between German and
yeah,
England
exactly.
also.
And don't forget that the UK is right across, the, you know.
Yeah.
So we're like in a really good position. As far as DJing, before we even go international, we become really good DJs. We have a lot of miles, you know, because before you go international, you probably do 300 gigs a year in the Netherlands. So eventually you're going to become very skilled. So this is why in general Dutch DJs from that era are let's say skilled. Yeah. Okay.
But is that different than in other countries? I have no idea if
yeah. Like when I tour the stage, it's hard to do like 2-3 gigs a night.
Yeah.
Because the Netherlands, you know,
of course.
It's
a small country, so there are a lot of small clubs, so you play a lot.
Yes, and then the territories are still different. Like Rotterdam and Amsterdam are far away enough, you know, to do both gigs.
Yeah.
And this is how you end up doing 300 gigs a year. So there's some form of explanation into it.
Yeah.
That's true.
Answer.
So you become very skilled doing 300 gigs a year, you know? Yeah. It's that simple. So by the time we are international, now let me remind you how long Don Diablo's been in the game.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? So when he breaks through international with
he had an all other career before,
but he was already a skilled DJ, you know? He was already an artist and a well-trained artist. Yeah. So seeing him there, like, oh shit, it looks like he was supposed to be there already. Yeah. So he's a well-trained artist.
Yeah. Is there still, like, you think, a Dutch sound?
You know what? After that whole bleepy thing, no, not really. The only Dutch sound we have is when we rap Dutch on different styles of beats.
Yeah.
But for the rest, there's not a Dutch. No, not really. No. But we always tend to kind of take things from the rest of the world and make it our own, which kind of makes it Dutch again, I guess.
Yeah, it's really like you mentioned before, the whole make it logic and...
exactly. Like, because if you listen to tracks from, let's say, the early Chicago days, we would listen to a track like, of course, you know, Can You Feel It is a great track, but we would say, okay, but we can make this kick better.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And at some point, maybe there isn't less soul than the original American version, to be honest. But
obviously,
but it's more danceable.
And we always had that approach, I guess. To make it more sense for us, you know.
And is there always, like, even you involved your sound, of course, but is there something like a signature in every track you made?
Like if I do a specific style, yes, but a signature in all the different styles, I'd say no, not anymore. Like if you ask me, like, make a typical Dutch track, of course, you know, you hear the sounds. But no, not anymore. Not because the music has changed, even for me, because my lifestyle has changed as well. Like back then I would literally mix and master the track myself, and now I just, you know, finish the track and just send it to mixing and mastering. So it has a different, you know, sound.
But what do you think? Maybe it's a big question, but what do you think is the secret of making a good tune?
Well, good is always in the you know. But for me, so for me, the most important thing is it has to work on the dance floor. This is why, like I said, it was always hard for me to make radio music, because I don't know how to do it. You know, I just make a track, and if it works for me, it works for me, and that was the only thing I knew how to do.
And maybe you're saying it right now. Maybe I don't know if there's a big gap between the radio and the club, but probably there is a difference in how full a track is. For a radio, I can tell as a radio DJ,
yeah.
It's like a lot of sounds, a lot of productions, all
a lot
in
of
3
melodic,
minutes. Yeah, exactly. And sometimes the more basic give me a beat higher than the sound.
Yeah, but if all the tracks are melodic, that one basic track will stand out, obviously,
Yeah,
and
true.
the other way around.
Yeah.
You know, if you have all
Yeah,
basic
yeah,
tracks,
true.
and you know what I'm saying. So define what's a good record. Then it's hard. So I could only judge from what I think would work for me, which I always did, and that is how I approach all the stuff, all the early stuff. But the interesting thing is, my vision of music kind of changed. You know, eventually I'm open to way more music. I'm not scared to release stuff
No.
like that. You like, I literally have tracks on Loco Dice's label. It's a techno label. I have 3 releases on it, and not even under an alias, not even under Chuckie. Because my thing is, eventually I want people to know, like, you know what, he did it all.
Yeah.
He did it all.
So the whole "don't be a prisoner of your own style."
Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
So I could literally pull up some projects I'm working on, and it would be, one would be like a Latin reggaeton track, and the other one would be like a super tech house or a techno track. You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying? I just want to have. I always fought for musical freedom.
And how do you see the future then in this?
Well, you know, the funny part is, ironically, I don't even know if I'm happy with you know, all these styles blending, because it's funny sometimes I just crave for that pure techno track,
Yeah,
or
yeah,
that
yeah,
pure
yeah,
house
yeah.
track that makes
Yeah.
you go, wow, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah.
And I kind of regret that, the fact that, you know what, why did I do all that bullshit, and eventually here you are, you want to hear a purest track, you know what I'm saying? So it's kind of
I'm sorry to say, Clyde, but you were one of the guys who were make those borders go away.
yeah, 100%, you know. But like I said, you know, so every now and then, or not every now and then,
No,
every
but
time
yeah,
I go out, I just want to go to like a hip hop party, or I want
Yeah.
to go to a techno
Yeah,
party.
yeah.
I don't want to go to no crossover party. No, I want to do, you know, it's crazy.
Yeah,
But yeah, it worked for me back then, and it kind of helped me make my story. And the most beautiful thing that came out of it is the fact that I was able, with my history, I was able to produce a sound that would open the doors for many guys. And I
Yeah.
think with only that is the mission accomplished, I would say, you know.
Yeah. You always see it as a compliment, because sometimes I can imagine you hear a track and you think, okay, it could have been mine. Like
Yeah, 100%, you know. But I was always, like I said, my vision of music changed. I was scared back then to release anything. Like, I would think months and months before I would release it, because what if this, what if that? I was calculating too many things.
Okay.
And you know, and now I'm like, you know, fuck it, just throw it out there. If nobody likes it, nobody likes it. Fine, we move on. You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying? But what if they really like it, and it's different and it's new? You know?
That's what you learned with all the releases you had and the
Yeah, definitely. So obviously I have a lot of releases I'm not really proud of, but I had to put it out because I
Yeah.
want to know, like, yo, I wanted to share,
yeah.
you know, my train of thoughts.
What's one of your tracks you're proud of and maybe isn't that well known? So of course there's Let the Bass Kick and Moomba.
I have this track called Rights. It's called Rights, and it came out on Loco Dice's label like last year. But the track I made in 2009.
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
Yeah, right. It's called Rights.
Right.
No, but I renamed it, and it's called The Watcher. It's called now, and it's
okay.
like a 6-minute techno track.
Okay.
And I remember because I called Silvio Icomo, which is a big producer from The Hague, and I just set up this new equipment, and we're in the studio vibing. I'm like, yo, I want to make this record, this loop. I want to play with this sound. So we started tweaking and playing with it, and yeah, we had the record. I released it on Dirty Dutch back then. Nobody cared. Fine. I still think nobody still cares, but the fact that Loco Dice picked it up almost 10 years later and decided to release it on his techno label with my name, you know, it means something to me, because it
And it's
also
timeless then.
yeah, but it also made me think, like, you see, you know, I can be comfortable with what I'm making and who I am,
Yeah.
no matter what style. And he's one of those guys as well. This is why I'm a big fan of Loco Dice and a good friend of him. We kind of share the same vision. He comes from hip hop. Matter of fact, I know him from hip hop record stores, you know, and seeing him becoming so successful in techno and tech house, it's only cool. And for me, big honor to be on his label with a track I made.
10 years ago.
Yeah.
Do you still have any goals you would like to achieve in music or?
I would like to be more in the studio
Okay.
and still my bills getting paid.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's hard because I wanna tour a lot because I love traveling the world, but at the same time, I know I make the difference when I'm just in the studio and only in the studio.
Yeah.
That's where I come up with concepts or sounds or ideas, different approaches to music. One of my bigger goals would be now, I would love to make a radio track that's like drum and bass.
Okay.
And that's why I'm happy when I hear stuff like rudimental and stuff.
Yeah.
This is exactly what I want to do at some point.
Okay.
Like make some big like drum and bass, but radio music.
Yeah.
Because the tempo it's well accepted now.
Yeah,
Half
absolutely.
tempo, it's rap. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Oh, well, looking forward
Yeah.
for that. Yeah.
Yeah, I have some things in the work.
And what's the big difference between then and now?
The big difference between then and now is that different styles of genres are more accepted now.
Yeah.
There's way more different genres at this very moment. The only thing I would say is back then, I think music was differently consumed. You know what I'm saying? You could make a track and that track would bubble in the underground and become bigger and bigger. So it could literally take 2-3 years for a track to become really
to
big.
build up
And now I made this track, put it on all the streaming
Yeah.
platforms, and tomorrow the world knows, and the day after the world forgot about it.
Okay.
That's a big difference. The biggest difference is the way we consume music now.
Yeah. And is that a good thing or not?
I don't know.
In both ways, you can. Of course,
Yeah,
it's like
yeah.
great that there's a lot of music.
Because to me, of course you have there's tracks with millions and millions of streams. For me, that doesn't mean it's a great track.
No.
And that's talking about music in general. And the only unfortunate thing is that we are so influenced by, let's say the industry.
Yeah.
That it's just hard to make just a regular house track, a 6-minute track, because now it has to fit Spotify. Because otherwise, because you want to have a streaming mega bomb, it's hard, man. So that the whole thing changed, and I think it influences the music production too much.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's a great lesson. We are here now in Holland, in a studio in New Vennep. I see a lot of records here.
Yeah.
Are you here a lot?
I'm here when I have to do talk about paperwork or whatever. Yeah, but the
administration,
studio I'm sharing with Child's Play because they needed a studio and I needed space for my records and an office. So I'm like, hey guys, it's a win-win situation and it's a good thing. And soon we're gonna connect some turntables and have some real fun. So we're gonna have turntables here.
Okay.
Yeah, because there's a lot of good
and
stuff.
do you still see a lot of Dutch guys on the road?
I still see a lot of Dutch guys on the road.
Is there like a Dutch scene? Does it exist or?
No, not really,
No.
because everybody kind of doing his own thing.
Yeah, okay.
And when I see that, I'm like, you see, I'm not crazy because I was basically the only one that was trying to make a big Dutch club with everybody hanging out. Obviously it's not the case. Everybody's doing their thing, and everybody has their own career, and probably they want it to be like that. But yeah. But we see each other a lot, especially like when there's like big festivals.
Yeah, of course.
Everybody's there because
And
we
then
all get
it's
booked.
small Dutch words and.
Small Dutch word, ha ha, he, and we gone.
and okay.
On to the next one.
Okay. The last questions. How do you think people in the future will look back on what I call electronic dance music now? And then it's before I ask this question, it's very hard to I don't know how I call it, because house music it's now a style, because for me like house music at first was like the big name of all.
Yeah.
EDM is like a general name, electronic dance music, but if you say EDM, you have like a big room sound in your head.
Yeah,
So how should I call it?
Well, that's a problem, I mean, obviously, like in Holland back then, we would call it all dance.
Yeah,
So you had a
dance,
category
exactly.
dance, right?
Exactly,
Dance. But the Americans made it electronic dance music.
Yeah.
Yo. But like what happened with me and Dirty Dutch, that sound got stuck to that name. Kind of happened with the term electronic dance music, EDM.
Yeah.
So that on the rise of that sound, when everybody started playing big room and big festivals, there was the name that was bubbling, EDM, electronic dance music, and kind of got stuck on there.
Yeah.
While all we were trying to do is make like a umbrella name for everything, you know. So yeah, that's why it sounds more sexy when you just say electronic music, you know.
Yeah.
Like even I'm confused when we're talking in this interview when we're
Yeah.
talking about electronic dance music.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
like, are you talking about electronic
Yeah,
music in
yeah.
you know in general
Yeah,
or
yeah.
specifically
Okay,
EDM?
so you say, okay, that's a good one. So you say, call it electronic music.
Yeah, electronic music, you know.
How do you think the people in the future will look back on this electronic music era?
This era, as in,
Yeah, the last 30 years. Yeah.
it's hard because eventually, you know, all those eras are instrumental and very important to eventually where we are going with this journey, you know. Like even if I look back at what I did, let's say even 10 years ago, I'm like, you know, back then it didn't make I know for sure that people weren't proud of it at that very moment.
yeah.
But afterwards they're like, yeah man, Dirty Dutch, I was there, man. You know what I'm saying? And
yeah,
even now within the whole EDM thing, nobody's kind of proud of it. But eventually you're like, yeah man, I remember we going to EDC and seeing W&W play or whoever, you know. They're gonna be proud of it eventually because it's a beautiful story the way we got there, you know.
It's a great story.
It's a great story the way we all got there, you know. We were able to create back doors and kicked in doors for a lot of people. You have to imagine that, you know, I probably inspired a lot of DJs or producers, and those producers inspired other producers, you know. And eventually, fast forwarding, like you could literally have a guy that was a big David Guetta fan, and because of David Guetta, he discovered Skrillex. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? And because of Skrillex, he discovered Excision. You know what I'm saying? You see what I'm saying? So you know, there's always something positive to get out of it. You know what I'm saying? Because I have a lot of friends now. They're like, yo, Chuckie. When I talk to them, I'm like, yeah, man. Yeah, because of you, I listen to electronic music now, and all they do is go to awakenings nowadays. You know what I'm saying? They don't even go to see Rogue, for example. They go to
techno.
Yeah, exactly. But I had I opened a gateway for them, and yeah, in this specific case, like I said, you know, it's only beautiful because one thing leads to another. So
great, man.
Can we be mad at it? Nah.
No. How do you want to be remembered?
I want them to know that, yeah, Chuckie did it all, man. Fuck, he did it all. Can you believe he made reggaeton, but he also had a techno track, and then, you know, he had his own sound, but he was doing this and that. Yeah, I just want them to know Chuckie was doing it all. Simple.
Thanks, man. Thank you so much for your time. It was a pleasure sharing your stories and helping me explore the musical history of electronic music.
Electronic music or electronic dance
electronic music?
Okay.
Yeah, well...
yeah, it's hard. No, even before we all started with the cameras, you know, you were telling me, and I know how hard it is, because by doing so...
But even house music, because that at a certain point I thought, for me it was like house music. But even house is a genre now.
It is a genre, and you know what? It is, and it's kind of went full circle. If you ask me, looking at the house scene now, and let's say also, so what we now know as techno and tech house is actually house. Yeah, you know, it has that same position as back then. It's a beautiful thing, man, the way it develops. Because the bigger the EDM scene gets, the more they resist. But the better the music gets. If you follow electronic music now, there's so many amazing producers. It's crazy, you know what I'm saying? And going to these events, like where you go to, they want to say Awakenings is underground. It's not underground if you look at the numbers of people that go there, you know. But the music itself, it's beautiful. It's amazing.
I'm so glad that you're still so positive and about this new era, because Yeah, maybe you were
No,
like
because
an old grumpy guy.
No, because the new era, this era has different subgenres. You know,
Yeah.
like okay, let's say EDM is on its own island. You know, but also it's techno.
Yeah.
It's on its own island, and everybody's is peaceful with
fun.
it.
Yeah,
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 you
yeah.
know, like
Yeah.
at this, we're living in an era where you could have a techno stage and an EDM stage. Like if you look at EDC, you know what I'm saying, or even like Ultra, there is a techno stage. And you know everybody's enjoying it, and if you don't want to listen to this style, you go to the other stage, which is a beautiful thing. So I'm cool with it, yeah, man, and I'm looking forward to the future because the way technology, like our music, is so depending on technology. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah,
there
yeah.
can, and you know it evolves, so it can only be more beautiful.
Okay, and like I said, we are building this story of Dutch house brick by brick. Is there a name who maybe I will forget? And you say, okay, in this series you have to interview.
As far as the DJs,
Yeah.
the guys. So
Yeah.
you had who?
Ferry Korsten.
Yeah.
Laid back look. Chesto, Everjack coming up.
Yeah.
Think about this. Don Diablo.
Yeah.
I have an appointment with.
Who else is on your list?
Fella Legrand.
Legrand,
Because
yeah.
of
Yeah.
and of course I've got a lot on my list, but yeah, well, I make this thing worldwide. So you mentioned, of course, Jean and Marcelo and
Yeah.
and Eric E. Those are great guys, but I think nobody has, nobody.
I think it all depends on what you want to highlight. Obviously, like if you want to highlight EDM, and so obviously you're gonna go to the head honchos that were doing EDM. But I would say try to approach it from the angle from the guys that were trying to resist the whole popularity of this music. You know what I'm saying? Like there's a time where all these big guys were doing a festival, and on the other hand you had like guys like Marnix from Loveland trying to still do his thing. And it was hard for him at a certain point because he was also trying to juggle. I remember me, Eric E, Gregor Salto also playing in Loveland because he was trying to provide a stage to stay relevant. But at this point he doesn't need none of that stuff, and he sells out crazy, so he survived that era. And to me that's kind of interesting, next to the fact that I really respect Marnix. But
he's a great guy.
The other side of the story,
Good one.
I would love to hear what he has to say, because he's still doing his thing.
Yeah.
And-
And I know him a bit. He's coming from the neighborhood. I
love
he was
Marnix.
giving parties for like 10 people or something in the beginning.
Yeah.
It was building and building, and
And now his music and his festival is more relevant than ever.
yeah.
Which is a beautiful thing, and I congratulate him for that, because as far as I was trying to cross over with stuff, he was still trying to stick it to his own lane and made it work, and this is why I'm like, I find it interesting if I would hear his story, because he had to survive the whole damn wave we were riding, you know what I'm saying? So yeah,
Great one.
but yeah, there's a lot of those guys, man.
Okay, well, if you have fun, text me. Thanks
Yes.
for listening. That's it for this time. If you have, any suggestions for who I'm going to visit next time, feel free to contact me. My Twitter is Giels, that's Giels. And, see you next time. Thank you so much,
Thank you
Clyde.
very much.
Thanks. Leuk, man.
Weet je wat het moeilijk maakt? Weet je wat het allemaal zo moeilijk maakt? Kijk, je hebt precies wat ik aan het begin zei, toch?
Ja.
Het is zoveel eigenlijk. Want ik kan het met jou hebben over, zeg maar, een hele specifieke era. We kunnen, zeg maar, 5 uur lang praten over de 90s.
Ja.
We kunnen 5 uur lang praten
dat is
over
het
die
ding.
Dutch scene. We kunnen 5 uur lang praten over house in general.
Het is bijna te groot.
Het is bijna te groot. Snap je? Het is heel moeilijk, want ik merk het.
Ik vind aan jouw top 5, dat is wel precies waar in ieder geval
De anker, maar dat is het ook. Want ik kan ook wel zeggen, ik pak eentje van afgelopen week, of eentje van 10 jaar geleden, eentje van 5 jaar geleden. Daarom heb ik bijvoorbeeld een plaat als Roman Flugel niet erin gezet. Het is wel een belangrijke plaat geweest.
maar hij is van later.
Ja, is van later. En het is, kijk, je ziet het ook, die top 5 van mij komt echt rechtstreeks uit 92, 93 en
Ja, ja.
bam, daar
Mij
grijp je
ook,
hem.
hoor.
En daar grijp ik hem, snap je?
Ja.
En dat is wat ik heb gedaan,
Ja.
om het, dan snap je van, oké. Maar dat heeft voor mij ook, dat wat je zegt, dat is die anker geweest.
Ja. Maar ja, kijk, en dat was, toen noemden we het toch allemaal gewoon house.
Ja, en dat was eigenlijk breakbeats.
Ja,
maar ook, kijk, als je naar die Chicago era kijkt,
Ja,
al die geweldige platen, dat komt ook echt uit 93, ik noem maar wat.
Ja.
92, 91 tot
Ja.
94, niet meer, niet minder, snap je?
Ja.
En dat was het. En
Ja.
dat is wat hun stempel ervoor maakt. Net zoals dat die Nederlandse platen, die Dutch sound die
Ja.
door is gebroken, komt ook uit
Ja.
2008 tot 2010, snap je? Allemaal daarna is allemaal bijkomstigheid, want Afrojack maakt al lang niet meer wat hij toen maakte
Nee,
en waarmee hij
nee.
is doorgebroken.
Nee.
Dat doet niemand meer natuurlijk. Maar die sound, dat was die era, snap je? En zo heb ik zeg maar die top 5 ook benaderd.
Ja,
Oké,
vet.
dat, bam, dat was hem. Heel simpel. En dat, oh, die platen.
vet hoor. Ja, ik was een wijze die breakbeat. Ik weet niet of jij, ik vond het zo leuk dat je al die hardcore DJ's noemde. Uit Haarlem kwam
Ja.
DJ Pavo.
Pavo ken ik ook goed.
En
Ja.
die was altijd met die breakbeatjes, jongen.
Ja, ja.
Lekker.
Hoe laat is het eigenlijk?
Ja,
trouwens?
dit is sorry.
Nee, maakt niet uit. Ja, die was ook altijd met die breakbeatjes. Maar heel veel van die gasten van Dark Raver ook. En dat was altijd het grappige, die top 5. Die Identity top 500, ken je die nog?
Ja.
En er zaten platen in die voor de hardstyle ook belangrijk waren.
Ja.
Kijk, precies, bijvoorbeeld deze. Hè? Toevallig zag ik het net hoor. Dan heb ik, kijk, deze plaat. Paris,
Ja,
dit is een hele belangrijke
Ja.
plaat geweest voor, net als 20 Seconds to Comply.
Ja.
Dat waren
Ja.
hele belangrijke
Maar dat is
platen voor
ook
die
gewoon
scene.
gaaf, hè? Want wat dat betreft die turn
Maar ik kan me nog, ja, precies, maar ik kan me heel goed herinneren, toen met Partyvlog, ja. Dan moest Dark Raver deed een hele lange set.
Ja.
En hij ging zeg maar zijn history doen, ja.
Ja.
Dan begon hij met dit soort platen. Is er een of ander koekenbakker die zegt, ja maar, leuk zo naar Dark Raver, maar hoezo moet je met R&B beginnen?
Ah. Ja, maar ja, dat zijn natuurlijk altijd
Oh.
krompe geesten, ja.
En toen dacht ik, nee, dat meen je niet, echt niet.
Oh,
Ja.
Dark Raver, god man.
Ja. Nee, maar er is zoveel. Weet je wat het moeilijk is? Dat meen ik wel. Ik wil het echt een keer door iemand laten schrijven of verfilmen.
Sorry for the non-Dutchies. We were talking about music, of course. And Chuckie was saying, and that's absolutely true, that we could talk about more than 5 hours about music. What a great afternoon, what a great guy. Thank you so much. Big shout out to Chuckie. Big shout out to you for listening. And of course, a big shout out to the guys of KRK. Still got the box here to show you the 7-inch professional powered near field studio monitor with Kevlar drivers. The Rocket G4. It sounds great here in the Can You Feel It studios. The classics and more. Feel free to drop any comment about guests who I have to invite, about records that I have to put on this classic house list. Let me know everything. Coming up next week, Don Diablo.